Hello, this is Pretty Guardian, and today we are going to be talking about Atelier Ryza 2 Lost Legends in the Secret Fairy. This is the second Atelier Ryza game. The first one came out in 2019. I had the pleasure of playing through it back in April of 2021, and I immediately went searching for the sequel. And there were two things that kind of put me off on buying it. And I just want to share them with you because it turned out to be totally unwarranted. The first off is in the Steam reviews, there was a review saying that this game is way smaller than the first one and it only has like 4 playable dungeons. You beat those dungeons and then that's basically it. And I will tell you after playing through the game that there is definitely more than 4 dungeons. And not only is there more than 4 dungeons, but a lot of the maps that we're exploring are a lot bigger this time around. There's more terrain to cover, more things to gather, and more methods of exploring. One of the methods of exploring that I found really fun was being able to dive underwater and then explore underwater and catch fish, gather seashells, and that sort of thing. The other piece of feedback that had me worried is that this game supposedly was significantly shorter than the first one. And I'll admit it is a little bit shorter than the first one, but if you go on like the website howlongtobeat.com and you look at how long it takes to beat this one, there's a lot of people saying that you can do everything in basically like 59 hours. And while maybe that's true if you rush through things or you're like a pro and know exactly what you're doing or you're not taking your time in the cutscenes, but I can tell you that I've gotten over 60 hours of gameplay out of this game. And for me, that's just a phenomenal value. Something that I will sometimes look at is how many hours of play to the dollar am I getting out of this game. So a $60 game, if you get 60 hours of gameplay out of it, that's $1 per hour. That's an excellent value, especially in today's economy. There's a lot of things that we do for entertainment that cost way more than $1 per hour. But I actually got this game on sale. So I spent even less and I got even more. So from just that sort of value proposition, this game was an excellent value for me. For people who may not be super familiar with the Atelier series, this is a series of RPGs that is very crafting focused. You take on the role of a budding alchemist, learning their craft, making potions and bombs and weapons and healing items and just all kinds of fun stuff as you explore these fantasy worlds and hone your alchemy. This is a long-running series. One of the more recent entries in it is the Atelier Ryza series, and there are 3 entries currently out right now. The third one just came out in the beginning of the year. I'm very much looking forward to playing it. One thing I will say about the Atelier series is that I've always been attracted to the aesthetic of it. You know, these games are giving us magical girl realness, but Atelier Ryza was the first one that really sunk its hooks into me. I just felt like the polish was so much more than what we've seen in the previous games. A lot of the systems have been streamlined. There's a lot of quality of life elements, and the graphics just in general are very beautiful anime graphics. Everything in the Atelier Ryza series just kind of took all of those gameplay elements and aesthetics that were familiar and gave them so much polish. And I think that that's a huge reason for the success of this last trilogy, not just Ryza's thick thighs, but also because there's really a lot of good elements here. Now, the story is relatively basic, but it does provide a lot of context for all of the things that we're doing. So this story takes place 3 years after the first game, and in the beginning, Ryza is given a mysterious egg. It's all speckled and magical looking, and she goes to the mainland, to the capital city, to kind of explore a little bit more, talk to some people, meet with her friends, Tao, who is a researcher, and just kind of see, like, what do people know about this egg? What's going on? Kind of uncover this mystery a little bit. And as you start uncovering mysteries and exploring these different ruins, you start uncovering this bigger, like, potentially world-ending plot that you have to solve. But the way that it all comes about, for me, feels organic in the sense that there's a very slow progression to that end game point. So you kind of see all of the characters building their skills, doing all these different quests, helping the townsfolk. And by the time they reach that end point, for me, it feels believable because you've seen them grow so much along the way, at least in terms of character progression. As far as actual character development, they do have a little bit of an arc to them, and you can definitely see some progression in them, but it's not necessarily like a stark contrast in that perspective. There are a ton of cutscenes in this game for all the main characters. They have little side quests and cutscenes. A lot of the side characters have side quests and cutscenes. There's a lot of slice of life sort of aspect to this game because a lot of the things that they're doing are pretty mundane. But I actually enjoyed a lot of those side stories, and I felt like in some of them, we had kind of a good foil to Ryza and her development as a person. As an example of that, we have Cassandra the farmer. So back in the first game, we know that Ryza's family were farmers, and she would constantly avoid actually doing farming work and run off and play and do her own thing. And so for her to be interacting with somebody who actually admits, like, you know what, I don't like farming, but I do it because I take pride in myself and pride in my work, and someone has to do it. And so for Ryza to be interacting with that sort of character from her own past, kind of seeing this different perspective of like, oh, okay, you know, maybe I didn't look at it from this perspective before, I thought was really good. And then there is another character, Dennis the blacksmith, and he is trying to make this like really special jewelry for a contest. And there's like little snippets of him saying, you know what, I don't want to use your alchemy. This for me is really about my craft, and I want to push it to the limits and have it be a fair competition to see where I stand. And so I felt like for her kind of looking at that aspect of going, okay, maybe not every problem needs alchemy to solve it. I just felt like in general, these characters that she was interacting with, their stories, while separate from hers, actually kind of reflected different aspects of like paths that she could have taken or perspectives that are valuable for her to incorporate into her own practices and her own life as a coming of age young woman. To break down the mechanics of the game a little bit further, the typical gameplay loop will involve you going out and exploring these maps, and exploration is a huge part of this. You'll be diving underwater, scaling cliffs, exploring multiple biomes, and as you explore these biomes and beat like the little mini bosses and stuff that are in them, you will come across this compass that will help you find different memories. So you're exploring these ruins of ancient cultures, and you're trying to like piece together the clues from these memories to kind of figure out what was going on in these ruins and unlock the deeper mystery that's present there. And for me, this was a lot of fun. It almost felt kind of like true crime, Charlie Day, like connecting the dots of all the things that have been happening in this area. You do have to read a little bit and actually like piece together those clues, but I thought it was a lot of fun. And I felt like the lore was very rich for their world. As you undoubtedly come across enemies and monsters, you will be partaking in their battle system. And this one I felt like was really unique. Usually in these types of RPGs, there is this dichotomy that people are always holding up of turn-based, which is more strategic combat where you have menus and you can select what you want to do and the enemies wait for you to take your turn. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you have action-based, which is more frenetic and fast-paced. attacks where the enemy is not waiting on you to do what it needs to do. And then you have this game, which to me kind of proves how stupid that whole dichotomy is, because what we have here is kind of an active time battle. So the enemies are not waiting for you to take your turn, but you are selecting options from menus. But there's so many options and so many things to do within the system that for me, it ends up feeling more like a rhythm game rather than like action combat or turn-based combat. There's even a certain call and response element to it. So for example, one of your party members will say, Ryza, use a magic attack. And so then you use a magical attack and it triggers them to do a special attack on their end. So you have these synergies going on. And then there's also defense. While you don't have an active dodge, you are able to block attacks. So there's a timing element of waiting for the enemies to strike so that you can block it. You can swap between your different characters on the fly and also chain different combos together. So overall, it's a very like streamlined and engaging combat system. I'm definitely a huge fan of it. I would recommend anybody check it out just for the sake of checking it out, because I think that it is fairly unique from what I've seen in other RPGs. After you collect all of your materials and you've beaten the baddies, you'll go back to your Atelier, your alchemy shop, sitting there around the cauldron, and you'll craft all kinds of items that will help with your progression. And they have a system that is very approachable as far as like being able to easily jump in and start crafting things. And it makes it easy to craft high level items too, once you know what you're doing. I found it to be a very colorful and fun system to engage with. There's also a skill tree where you can unlock different items that you can craft, different special abilities, and upgrade your gathering and crafting in general. And so then as you boost your crafting and your gathering and your gear, you're able to go back out and continue exploring and kick even more monster ass. Overall, this game was so much fun. I absolutely loved it. I'm very much looking forward to the third game, which is out now. So thank you so much for watching along. If you played this game or any in the Atelier series, let me know all about it. And if not, just let me know what RPGs you're looking forward to playing this year. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, this is Pretty Guardian, logging out.